lives have become more dependent on and driven by technology. The advances in information systems and technology has solved many problems for us, but has also created new ones. This research paper will help to determine whether citizens' right to privacy takes priority over public safety and the public good. We are being tracked every day by one gadget or another like smartphones, smartwatches, and smart TVs. Information is being collected on us every day as well, either voluntarily or unknowingly. As we go through our lives day by day, hour by hour, and minute by minute, we are being recorded without our consent and we are being scanned without our knowledge. But we also are volunteering our private information to companies in one form or another for one reason or another. Should all of this information be allowed to be used without our consent? If so, how much of a citizen's private information should be available to the public for public use, and who should make the decision? Have you ever had a conversation about something and decided to use your phone to do a search on the topic, and as soon as you start typing in the question, the subject you were discussing pops up? Have you ever noticed that after you use Google Maps to guide you to work, that the next day Google Maps will tell you how long it will take you to get to work? If you feel you are being watched, you have good reason to think that way, and you are not alone. We are all being tracked and data collected on us every day by electronic devices, our cars, Google, Instagram, Alexa, and Siri. One of the biggest data collectors is the cell phone. Most Americans, 96%, now own a cell phone of some kind. Along with mobile phones, Americans also own an array of other information devices, with nearly three-quarters of U.S. adults owning a laptop or a desktop or laptop computers, and approximately half of U.S. adults owning a tablet computer or an e-reader device. Other forms of electronic devices that tracks us all are the smartwatch, the fitness tracker, smart assistants, and automobiles. CCS Insight report states that 71 million smartwatches and 40 million fitness trackers were sold in 2018. Amazon has sold more than 100 million devices with its Alexa smart assistant built in. Automakers reported 17.27 million vehicles sold in the US in 2018. All of these vehicles had multiple computers on them collecting one type of data or another. New York City uses several different types of surveillance equipment to track every resident and visitor to its city. In 2017, New York City acquired the state-of-the-art facial recognition technology for the purpose of scanning all faces of all drivers commuting between the boroughs of New York City. By 2015, there were approximately 17,000 cameras throughout New York City, according to an article in the New York Daily News, most of which were installed after 9/11. But New York's surveillance network was nothing compared to the 500,000 cameras observing public spaces throughout Greater London's so-called Ring of Steel. That's one camera for every 16 people. Along with the thousands of cameras watching the streets of New York City, according to the MTA, there are more than 4,500 cameras throughout the subway system, which are housed in what look like electrical conduits. Every day, users knowingly and unknowingly trade their data for goods and services with companies that profit off of their personal information. Some people trade their information for goods and services instead of having to pay for them with money. Users allow at least 77.4% of websites globally to track their data in exchange for use of the site. Most of us have a tendency to know when the company has crossed the line when it comes to use of our data. We may be okay when Uber remembers our home address so that we can avoid typing it in every time we use a service. But if Uber were to supply that same information to a database where anyone could look up our Uber ride history, most people feel that they are being violated by Uber. Few people mind that Facebook shows them targeted advertisements, but many might react negatively if Facebook began selling access to their Facebook profiles to potential employers or landlords. Every day, Walmart accumulates the equivalent of 167 times the books in the Library of Congress of unstructured data from 1 million customers. Walmart, along with most all other big box stores, have access to many types of consumer data, including consumer name, the consumer contact information, which includes physical address, phone number, and email address. They also have access to the consumer purchase histories. As Walmart's CEO of Global Commerce said in 2013, we want to know what every product in the world is. We want to know who every person in the world is. And we want to have the ability to connect them together in a transaction. More and more commuters are encouraged to acquire transponders for their cars, which allows commuters to go through bridges and toll roads without having to stop and pay with cash or a card. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission in the San Francisco Bay Area counts on motorists to use the fast-track transponders to pay tolls. But the Commission also collects data from these devices for the purpose of traffic studies. The Chevrolet Volt is a plug-in electric car that also has a gas engine. When consumers buy a Volt, GM asks them to sign an agreement that lets GM anonymously tap the car for information about its performance. According to the GM General Manager Larry Nitz, 4 out of 5 consumers agree. Nissan also collects information on their electric car, the Leaf. The Leaf lets owners monitor their electric car from their smartphones as part of its CarWing system. While the consumer is monitoring its electronic car, the automaker can find out about GPS navigation, speed and distance, driving habits, battery use, charging history, and deterioration, electrical system functions, software version, and other spot data to assist in identifying and analyzing the performance of the Nissan Leaf. A medical center's two-site survey of their medical personnel shows their willingness to share clinical data for research. On average, 53% of respondents were somewhat or definitely willing to share clinical data with identifiers, and 89% of respondents were somewhat or definitely willing to share without identifiers. When participants were asked about the category of data that they would be willing to share, there were subtle differences. The data of the most concern to respondents were substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health. The data that caused some concern was disability, chronic illness, reproductive history, and alcohol or tobacco use. In general, males were more willing to share data of any kind, older participants were less likely to be willing to share, and the younger participants seemed less concerned about alcohol, tobacco, and substance abuse data. Thanks to vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicles can wirelessly exchange their information with other vehicles. This information includes their speed, their location, and the direction in which they are heading. The V2V communication technology allows vehicles to send and receive omnidirectional messages. This creates a 360-degree awareness of other vehicles within range. Vehicles equipped with the appropriate software can use the messages from surrounding vehicles to determine potential crash threats as they develop. The technology can then utilize tactile, audible, and visual alerts, or a combination of them all, to warn drivers. With these alerts, the drivers can then take action to avoid crashes. With this technology, drivers are sharing their driving information with multiple unknown other drivers all at one time. Today's cars have electronic data recorders, or EDRs, also known as black boxes. The capabilities of these devices is pretty straightforward. The EDR goes into action if the car's airbags deploy in a crash. It records the vehicle's speed, status of airbags, braking, and acceleration. It also detects the severity of an accident and whether the passenger seat belts were buckled. Your face is a very important part of who you are and how you are identified. Except for identical twins, the face is arguably a person's most unique physical characteristic. Facial recognition software falls into a larger group of technologies known as biometrics. Biometrics uses biological information to verify identity. Visionix Faceit software can pick someone's face out of a crowd, extract that face from the rest of the scene, and compare it to a database full of stored images. As you walk down the street, you are oblivious to the camera that's capturing your image, comparing to databases, and storing that information in another database. License plate readers are mounted on police cars, on bridges, road signs, and other objects. They use small, high-speed cameras to photograph thousands of plates per minute. The readers capture the license plate number along with the location, date, and time of the scan. The information is collected and distributed to databases and other regional sharing systems. As a result, enormous databases of innocent motorist location information are growing rapidly. This information is often retained for years or even indefinitely, with few or no restrictions to protect privacy rights. Should we still have the reasonable expectation of privacy? With all of the information being collected, stored, shared, and sold every day, can we still expect anonymity? Are the days of paying the phone company to not publish our names in the phone books gone forever? Today's society has both the blessing and the curse of having access to a vast range of technology. A person can be diagnosed by doctors from their own home via video chat, communicate with someone located on the other side of the world instantaneously, or monitor his or her home through enhanced security systems. Society is in the information age. This information is stored by third parties, including internet service providers, phone companies, websites, and merchants. But this information can also end up in the hands of the government. In the wake of some courtroom cases, courts were uncertain as to how the privacy of electronic communications should be handled. Some courts interpreted the third-party doctrine and determined that there was no expectation of privacy in non-content information. Big data has become a great asset for many organizations, promising improved operations and new business opportunities. However, big data has increased access to sensitive information that, when processed, can directly jeopardize the privacy of individuals and violate data protection laws. Because consumers often opt to give away data when it benefits them, some say privacy issues are no cause for concern. Fears have been blown out of proportion, says Mukul Verma, a top GM safety expert who is now a consultant. Consumers' private information is often used for the safety of ourselves and the general public. The Centers for Disease Control is a perfect example on how personal information can be used for the safety of the public. Amongst other things, the CDC tracks threats to health and leading causes of death. By gathering personal information on babies who have died of SIDS, the CDC was able to give guidelines to parents on how to keep their infant from becoming a victim. With the innovations in DNA technology, DNA has made huge changes in our lives. Everyone convicted of a sex-related crime is required to surrender their DNA to the government. On the other hand, consumers are freely giving their DNA to the company that analyzes DNA and gives them their ancestral history. Although the sex offenders know their DNA is added to a national database of sex offenders to be used to solve other crimes, most consumers who submit their DNA to genealogy service companies aren't aware that their DNA can be used for the same thing. Take the case of Joseph James DeAngelo. In April 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo was a 72-year-old resident of a Sacramento County, California suburb who was arrested for many unsolved rapes and murders that were committed from the 1970s to the 1980s. Law enforcement had recovered the DNA of the perpetrators of these crimes from several crime scenes at the time the crimes were committed. In 2018, they entered the suspect's DNA into the GED Match database. GED Match, an open-source website that allows users to upload their genetic profiles from consumer genetic testing sites and make the profiles public to other GED Match users. This DNA sample identified an individual who was biologically related to the suspect. This match eventually led to other individuals in the family tree and ultimately to the DeAngelo. Based on the fact law enforcement can use one person's DNA to catch a criminal and prevent them from committing additional crimes, the argument can be made that the public safety does take precedence over an individual's right to privacy. Apple is a technology leader that prides itself on the safety and security of its products. The FBI needed help in unlocking the iPhone of a gunman who killed 14 people and was then killed by law enforcement. The FBI wanted access to the gunman's phone to determine if there were any other attacks planned and who all was involved. Due to the security on the phone, the FBI was unable to unlock it. They asked Apple for its help, but Apple refused. The case was taken to court, and Apple was ordered to help unlock the phone. Whether it is one life or 1,000 lives being saved, a human life is more important than information. The argument can definitely be made that regardless to whether the data is collected willingly or unknowingly, the safety of the general public should have priority over an individual's privacy. Although, while consumers' private information can be used for the good of the general public, there is always the real possibility that individuals' private information can be misused, and therefore the government should be very careful not to abuse the use of this information. There will also need to be regulations enacted to protect individuals' privacy while protecting the public. Amazon currently has a facial recognition software called Amazon Rekognition. It is currently being used by companies to build facial recognition databases on American citizens. Ironically, Amazon doesn't disclose its recognition customers without their consent. Last year, the Senate proposed a bill that would limit businesses from collecting and tracking facial recognition data without consent. Further research to determine how private information can be kept private while still helping the general public would help in determining who has priority.